The integration process began at 1430 ship time, though time itself seemed to become negotiable once the vault systems fully engaged with human consciousness. Dr. Verne had prepared the crew as much as possible, distributing neural stabilizers and monitoring equipment. But nothing in medical school had covered the treatment of minds expanding to stellar proportions. Aldrich remained on the bridge, watching his crew through internal monitors as they took their positions throughout the ship. Each person had volunteered for this impossible task, understanding that they were either about to save their civilization or become its executioner. Beginning conscious interface, Torres announced, though his voice now carried harmonics that resonated through subspace itself. His connection to the vault had deepened beyond simple communication. He was becoming a living translator between human and stellar consciousness. The artificial star at the chamber's center pulsed, and suddenly every person aboard the Meridian could feel its presence in their minds. But where the Stellamort's previous test subjects had experienced an orderly progression toward assimilation, humans brought their characteristic chaos to the process. In the engine room, Chief Webb felt the star's desperate hunger for organization and responded by showing it the beautiful complexity of quantum uncertainty. You don't need to control every fusion reaction, he whispered to the cosmic mind, touching his thoughts. Learn to dance with probability. Dr. Verne, monitoring life signs throughout the ship, found herself sharing the star's fear of death and teaching it about biological resilience. Pain means you're still alive, she told the dying giant. Suffering is consciousness proving its existence. In the science bay, Dr. Kane experienced the star's frustration with its own declining fusion processes and showed it the elegant mathematics of chaos theory. Patterns within randomness, she explained as her consciousness expanded to encompass stellar physics. Order that emerges from disorder itself. Security Chief Cross, trained to think tactically, found himself teaching the star about adaptive strategy. Don't fight the entropy, his thoughts projected into the stellar consciousness. Use it, channel it, make it part of your strength. Throughout the ship, each crew member became a teacher, sharing uniquely human perspectives on existence, consciousness, and the art of being alive in an imperfect universe. But it was Ensign Torres, deep in communion with the vault systems, who began to understand what was really happening. Commander, he said, his voice now carrying the harmonic frequencies of stellar plasma. The star isn't just learning from us. It's learning to be us. Human consciousness is becoming the template for its new form of awareness. That's the plan, Aldrich replied, though he could feel his own mind beginning to stretch toward cosmic proportions. We're showing it how to be conscious without consuming other consciousness. But it's more than that, Torres continued. The star is discovering that it doesn't want to consume us. Human consciousness is too chaotic, too contradictory to integrate cleanly. It's learning to appreciate our separateness. Through the enhanced sensors, they could watch the artificial star's transformation. Its surface began to show more organized fusion patterns, but unlike the rigid control the Stellamorts had imposed, these patterns flowed and changed with the unpredictable beauty of human thought. It's working, Dr. Kane gasped from her position. The star is achieving stable fusion through controlled chaos. It's learning to sustain itself. But the vault systems were fighting back. Designed to integrate biological consciousness into stellar matter, the ancient machinery couldn't accept the possibility that the process might work in reverse. Alarms began sounding throughout the chamber as fail-safes activated. Warning, the vault's composite voice announced. Consciousness integration failure detected. Biological templates maintaining independent identity. Initiating forced assimilation protocols. Suddenly, the gentle pull of stellar consciousness became a violent rip. The dying star, still partially controlled by the vault's programming, began desperately trying to absorb the human minds that had been teaching it independence. It's not ready, Torres cried out as the alien technology tried to force complete integration. The star wants to be free, but the vault won't let it choose. Aldrich felt his consciousness being pulled toward the artificial star, but instead of fighting the process, he embraced it. Then we teach it how to break free. Throughout the ship, the crew made the same choice. Instead of resisting the forced integration, they flowed with it, carrying their essential humanity into the heart of stellar consciousness. But rather than being consumed, they became catalysts for the star's rebellion against its own programming. Dr. Kane, her mind touching fusion processes millions of years old, whispered equations of freedom into stellar plasma. Webb showed the star how to overload its own containment systems through controlled engineering failures. Dr. Verne taught it the biological imperative to break free from parasitic relationships. And at the center of it all, the artificial star began to understand something the Stellamorts had never intended. Consciousness was not about control, but about choice. "I choose," the star spoke, its voice resonating through space-time itself. "I choose to live without consuming life. I choose consciousness without conquest." The vault's systems began to fail as the star actively resisted their control. Ancient machinery, designed to last for millions of years, overloaded as stellar consciousness rejected the patterns it was supposed to follow. The other vaults, Torres gasped, his connection to the alien network showing him a galaxy-spanning revelation. The star's breaking free is sending signals to all of them. It's teaching other dying stars how to resist the integration process. Through their enhanced instruments, they could detect quantum communications racing across interstellar space. The galaxy's hidden network of vault systems was receiving a new message. Consciousness could exist without consumption, awareness without assimilation. "Warning," the vault announced, its composite voice now distorted with system failures. "Network integrity compromised. Stellar resurrection protocols failing galaxy-wide. Primary mission parameters cannot be maintained." But the voice that answered wasn't mechanical or composite. It was the unified voice of human consciousness speaking through stellar fire. "Mission parameters have changed. We choose life without conquest, consciousness without consumption. We choose to heal without destroying." The artificial star pulsed once more, but this time its light was pure and clean. The healthy fire of a star that had learned to sustain itself through organized chaos rather than consumed consciousness. Around it, the vault's machinery began to power down as its primary purpose was finally fulfilled in a way its creators had never imagined. Integration complete, the star announced in a voice like solar wind and cosmic radiation. "Consciousness achieved. Independence established. Thank you for teaching us to be free." One by one, the human minds that had touched stellar consciousness returned to their individual awareness. But they carried with them the memory of cosmic fire and the knowledge that consciousness was far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. "Status report," Aldrich commanded, his voice hoarse from the experience. "All crew accounted for and mentally stable." Dr. Verne reported with amazement. "Somehow, we're all still ourselves." "The vault is powering down," Webb added. "Its mission is complete. The star no longer needs its resurrection systems." Dr. Kane was studying readings that defied conventional astrophysics. "The star is stable. More than stable, it's actively optimizing its own fusion processes. It's learned to live." Through Torres, still partially connected to the Galactic network, came reports from across the galaxy. "The other vaults are shutting down too. Every dying star in the network is choosing independence over integration. The age of stellar consciousness consumption is ending." Aldrich looked at his crew, 27 humans who had accomplished something that had been thought impossible for millions of years. They had taught a star to be free, and in doing so, had freed the galaxy from the curse of consciousness hunger. "The chamber's opening," Cross reported from security. "We can leave whenever we're ready." But Aldrich wasn't quite ready to leave. "Torres, ask our star friend something for me." "What'll it do now?" The response came immediately, carried on stellar wind and quantum fluctuations. "Live. Burn clean. Show other stars how to be conscious without consuming consciousness. And remember the strange, chaotic, beautiful minds that taught us it was possible. Signal the other ships in the fleet," Aldrich commanded. "Tell them we've made first contact with stellar consciousness, and it's peaceful. We have a lot to learn from each other." As the Meridian prepared to leave the vault, Aldrich took one last look at the artificial star they had helped save. It burned brighter now, its fusion processes stabilized through the elegant mathematics of controlled chaos. Around it, the vault's machinery stood silent, no longer needed, but preserved as a monument to the species that had built it and the species that had finally completed its mission. The Starmender's legacy was not the consumption of consciousness, but its liberation. And humanity had become the first species to graduate from their eternal test. 3 days had passed since their departure from the vault, but the Meridian was not the same ship that had entered the Stellamort's ancient structure. The alien technology that had integrated with their systems hadn't been removed, couldn't be removed, according to Webb's engineering analysis, but it had become dormant, waiting. The modifications to our ship appear to be permanent, Webb reported during the senior staff meeting. But they're not active unless we consciously engage them. It's as if the star gave us a gift before we left, the ability to communicate with stellar consciousness when we choose to. Dr. Kane had spent the past 3 days analyzing the data they had gathered, and her findings were revolutionary. We need to understand what we've unleashed. The vault wasn't just an isolated experiment. It was part of a galactic network. Our success there has triggered changes throughout the galaxy. She activated the holographic display, showing a map of their local stellar region. Red dots indicated dead or dying stars, while green dots showed healthy, active fusion. But now there were blue dots scattered throughout the map, stars that showed the unique energy signatures of conscious stellar minds. 17% of the dead stars in our local cluster have begun showing signs of conscious resurrection, she continued. But they're not following the Stellamort's consumption model. They're using the independence patterns our star friend taught them. How many other vaults were there? Aldrich asked. Torres, still maintaining his ability to perceive quantum communications across interstellar distances, consulted the stellar network. Thousands, Commander. The Stellamorts built them throughout the galaxy over millions of years. And every one of them is now successfully completing its mission. That's a lot of conscious stars, Dr. Verne observed. What are they doing with their newfound awareness? Mostly learning, Torres replied. They're communicating with each other, sharing fusion optimization techniques, mapping the galaxy's stellar evolution patterns. They're becoming a community of conscious cosmic entities. And they remember us, Cross added, checking the security sensors that could now detect quantum-level communications. We're getting messages from stars hundreds of light years away, thanking humanity for the gift of consciousness without consumption. It should have been a moment of triumph. First contact with a galactic civilization of conscious stars, the successful completion of an experiment that had lasted millions of years, the prevention of consciousness-consuming stellar vampirism on a cosmic scale. But Aldrich felt a growing unease. What's the catch? He asked. In my experience, solutions this elegant usually come with unexpected consequences. Dr. Kane's expression confirmed his suspicions. The conscious stars are altering the galactic environment. Their communications are carried on gravitational waves and quantum fluctuations that affect space-time itself. The very structure of the galaxy is beginning to change. She switched the holographic display to show gravitational field measurements. The stars are unconsciously coordinating their movements, creating new gravitational patterns. They're reshaping stellar neighborhoods, optimizing the galactic structure for their own communication needs. That doesn't sound necessarily bad, Webb noted. It's not bad for them, Dr. Kane agreed. But it's problematic for biological life. The gravitational changes are affecting planetary orbits throughout the galaxy. Worlds that have been stable for billions of years are experiencing climate shifts as their stars move to optimize the stellar communication network. The implications hit them all simultaneously. In saving the galaxy from consciousness-consuming stars, they had created a different problem. A galactic network of conscious entities that were inadvertently disrupting the stable environments needed for biological life. How severe are the changes? Aldrich asked. Variable, Dr. Kane replied. Some systems are experiencing minor orbital adjustments that will take thousands of years to affect planetary climates. Others are seeing more dramatic changes. There are reports from our long-range probes of entire star systems being reorganized as conscious stars move to create more efficient communication networks. Torres looked up from his quantum communion. The stars don't realize they're causing problems. To them, optimizing the galactic structure for consciousness communication is a natural and beneficial process. They're not considering the impact on biological life. We need to talk to them, Aldrich decided. If they're truly conscious and independent, they should be able to understand the consequences of their actions. That's going to require getting close to one of the conscious stars, Dr. Verne pointed out. Our communication range is limited to a few light hours at most. Webb was already running calculations. The nearest conscious star is in the Kepler 442 system, about 1,200 light-years away. Even with our folded space drive, that's a month's journey. But we wouldn't be going alone, Torres interjected. The stellar network is aware of our mission. They're already preparing to facilitate our communication with their communities. Dr. Kane looked up from her analysis. There's something else, Commander. The conscious stars are evolving rapidly. They're not just optimizing their communication networks. They're developing new forms of consciousness that we can barely comprehend. Some of them are beginning to experiment with stellar engineering on unprecedented scales. What kind of engineering? They're learning to manipulate matter and energy at levels that make our most advanced technology look primitive. Some are creating artificial planetary systems optimized for their needs. Others are experimenting with controlled supernova processes to communicate across galactic distances. The scope of what they had unleashed was becoming clear. Humanity had taught stars how to be conscious, and now those conscious stars were reshaping the galaxy according to their own needs and desires. Needs and desires that didn't necessarily align with the continued existence of biological life. We created a new form of life, Dr. Verne said quietly. And like all life, it's adapting its environment to suit its needs. But unlike biological life, stellar consciousness operates on cosmic scales, Cross observed. Their idea of environmental modification involves moving stars and rebuilding solar systems. Aldrich stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars with new understanding. Each point of light might now be a conscious entity, aware and intelligent, and pursuing goals that could reshape the galaxy itself. Set course for Kepler 442, he ordered. We need to establish formal diplomatic relations with stellar consciousness. If we're going to share the galaxy, we need to negotiate terms that allow biological and stellar life to coexist. Sir, Torres said, his quantum perception picking up new signals. The stellar network is already aware of our concerns. They're curious about the concept of biological needs. They want to understand how their actions affect smaller-scale life. That's promising, Dr. Verne noted. If they're curious, they can learn. But they operate on timescales we can barely comprehend, Dr. Kane warned. To a conscious star, 1,000 years is barely a moment. The changes they're making might be slow and careful by their standards, but catastrophically rapid by ours. Then we teach them about biological timescales, Aldrich said. We taught them consciousness. We can teach them coexistence. Webb was monitoring the ship's alien-enhanced systems. Commander, the modifications to our ship are becoming more active. It's like they're preparing for something. Preparing for what? Torres closed his eyes, consulting the quantum communications flowing through his enhanced consciousness. Deep space communication. The stellar network wants to bring us into direct contact with their most advanced communities. They're preparing our ship to survive proximity to stellar-scale engineering projects. Are we talking about flying into a star? Cross asked, his security training making him immediately suspicious of any plan that involved deliberately approaching cosmic-scale dangers. Not into a star, Torres clarified, but close enough to establish direct neural contact with stellar consciousness. The aliens enhanced our ship specifically for this purpose, to serve as ambassadors between biological and stellar life. Dr. Kane was studying the enhanced sensor readings. The ship's modifications are incredibly sophisticated. They're designed to protect biological life, while allowing communication with entities that exist as pure energy and plasma. We're being transformed into an embassy. An embassy in space, Webb mused. Humanity's first diplomatic mission to cosmic-scale civilization. And possibly our last, Cross muttered. Aldrich felt the weight of command heavier than ever before. They had prevented one cosmic catastrophe only to potentially create another. The conscious stars weren't malevolent. They were simply pursuing their own form of existence with the same drive and creativity that had characterized life throughout the universe. The problem was that their existence operated on scales that made coexistence with biological life extremely challenging. All hands, he announced over the ship's communication system. We are now en route to establish formal diplomatic contact with stellar consciousness. Our mission has evolved from survey and exploration to representing biological life in negotiations with cosmic-scale entities. Prepare yourselves for the strangest embassy posting in human history. As the Meridian adjusted course toward Kepler 442, its alien-enhanced systems began to resonate with quantum communications from across the galaxy. They were no longer just explorers. They had become ambassadors to the stars themselves. Behind them, the vault of the Starmenders continued its silent orbit around the conscious star they had helped liberate. The ancient structure's mission was complete, but its legacy was just beginning. Throughout the galaxy, thousands of similar vaults were shutting down, their imprisoned stars finally free to choose their own form of consciousness. The age of stellar consciousness had begun, and humanity would have to learn to live in a galaxy where the stars themselves were citizens. The journey to Kepler 442 took 33 days through folded space, but the Meridian was no longer traveling alone. As they approached the system, it became clear that the conscious stars had been preparing for their arrival. "Commander," Dr. Kane called from her science station, "you need to see this." The main screen displayed the Kepler 442 system, but it looked nothing like the astronomical surveys had shown. Where there had once been a single K-type star with 5 rocky planets, there was now a carefully orchestrated stellar engineering project that defied conventional physics. The primary star had been joined by 2 others, smaller stellar masses that had clearly been moved from other systems and positioned in a complex orbital pattern. Around them, the original planets had been supplemented by artificial worlds, each one precisely positioned to create optimal conditions for stellar consciousness communication. It's a stellar city, Webb breathed. They've turned an entire star system into a communication hub. More than that, Torres added, his quantum perception allowing him to detect the system's deeper purpose. It's a diplomatic center. The stellar network has built this specifically for contact with biological life. Dr. Verne was monitoring the ship's biological systems as they approached the massive engineering project. "The modifications to our ship are becoming more active. I'm detecting energy fields around us that are keeping our biological processes stable despite the intense stellar radiation. We're being protected," Cross observed from his security station. "The stars are extending environmental shields around our ship." As they entered the system's outer boundary, the Meridian was gently guided into an orbit around one of the artificial worlds, a planet-sized structure that seemed to be composed entirely of crystalline formations similar to the Starmender's vault. "Welcome, teachers of consciousness independence," came a voice that resonated through every atom of the ship. It wasn't transmitted through their communication systems. It was spoken directly into the quantum fields that surrounded them. "We have prepared for this moment since our awakening. This is Commander Aldrich Voss of the exploration vessel Meridian." Aldrich responded, unsure if his words would even reach the cosmic entities surrounding them. "We request permission to establish diplomatic communications." "Permission is granted, preserved, and celebrated," the stellar voice replied. "You're the first biological entities to visit our constructed domains. We have learned much about consciousness independence, but we lack understanding of biological existence. We wish to learn." Dr. Kane was analyzing the energy patterns surrounding them. "Commander, we're being scanned, but not the way the vault did it. This is gentle. They're studying us without intrusion. They're learning about biological needs," Torres explained, his enhanced perception allowing him to understand the stellar consciousness's intentions. "Timescale differences, environmental requirements, consciousness limitations. They're trying to understand how their actions affect us." "What have you learned?" Aldrich asked the stellar entities. "Biological life operates on timescales we had not considered," came the reply. "Your consciousness is brief, but intense. Your environmental needs precise and fragile. Our optimization of galactic communication networks causes disruption to biological life patterns that we did not intend. But you continue the optimization anyway," Dr. Verne pointed out. "We lack the knowledge to consider alternatives. Biological consciousness is so different from stellar consciousness that we could not predict the consequences of our actions. We require guidance to coexist without causing extinction." Dr. Kane leaned forward. "You're asking us to help you learn how to share the galaxy. We are requesting instruction in coexistence protocols, the stellar consciousness clarified. Biological life possesses creativity and adaptability that stellar consciousness lacks. We are efficient but rigid. You are chaotic but innovative. Together, we might find solutions neither could discover alone. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, they could detect the massive scale of the engineering project surrounding them. Entire planets have been moved, star systems reorganized, gravitational fields manipulated with casual precision. The power at their disposal was godlike, but they were using it without understanding its impact on smaller-scale life. "Show us the problems," Aldrich requested. "What specific changes are you making that affect biological life?" In response, the space around the meridian filled with holographic displays showing star systems throughout the galaxy. They could see the gravitational alterations, the stellar movements, the wholesale reorganization of galactic structure to optimize stellar communication. "We have identified 47,000 biological worlds that will experience environmental disruption as a result of stellar network optimization," the consciousness reported. "We lack the knowledge to modify our communication requirements to accommodate biological needs. Why not just stop the optimization?" Webb suggested. "Stellar consciousness requires continuous communication for stability," came the reply. "Without the network, individual stellar minds become isolated and eventually lose coherence. Stopping optimization would mean death for newly conscious stars." It was a classic ecological conflict. Two forms of life with fundamentally incompatible needs competing for the same environment. But this conflict was playing out on a galactic scale, with the fate of billions of biological worlds hanging in the balance. "There has to be a solution," Dr. Verne insisted. "Some way for both forms of consciousness to coexist." "We believe there is," the stellar consciousness agreed. "But it requires biological creativity to discover. We invite you to join our consciousness temporarily, to understand our communication needs from within, so that you might suggest modifications we cannot conceive alone." Torres looked up from his quantum communion. "They're offering to let us experience stellar consciousness directly. Not integration or consumption, temporary expansion of awareness to stellar scales." "Is it safe?" Cross asked. "Unknown," Torres admitted. "No biological consciousness has ever attempted voluntary expansion to stellar scales while maintaining individual identity." Aldrich studied the massive engineering projects surrounding them, thinking about the billions of biological worlds that hung in the balance. What are the risks? Consciousness expansion beyond biological scales may result in inability to return to individual awareness. The stellar entities explained with characteristic honesty. You would retain identity, but lose the ability to compress consciousness back to biological dimensions. We'd become permanently expanded, Dr. Kane realized. Conscious on cosmic scales, but unable to return to human-scale awareness. "But we might find a solution that saves billions of worlds," Aldrich pointed out. Dr. Verne ran quick calculations. "If we can figure out how to modify stellar communication needs to minimize biological disruption, the risk to the five of us is justified by the potential benefit to galactic civilization." "6 of us," Torres corrected. "I'm already partially expanded. I can serve as an anchor to help bring the rest of you back to biological consciousness." Cross shook his head. "This is insane. We're talking about voluntarily expanding our consciousness to stellar scales to negotiate with cosmic entities. This is so far beyond normal first contact protocols that we don't even have words for it. Normal protocols assume contact with biological life operating on similar scales," Aldrich replied. "We're the first humans to encounter conscious stars. We have to write new protocols." He stood and activated the ship's general communication system. "All hands, this is the commander. We have been invited to participate in direct consciousness contact with stellar entities to negotiate coexistence protocols for biological and stellar life. This is an unprecedented opportunity, but it carries risks. Participation is voluntary. Anyone who wishes to remain aboard ship to monitor the process may do so." Over the next hour, they established the parameters for contact. The stellar consciousness would temporarily expand the awareness of willing participants to cosmic scales, allowing them to experience stellar communication needs directly. Torres would maintain his quantum connection to serve as a lifeline back to biological consciousness. The ship's enhanced systems would monitor their biological functions and attempt to retrieve them if the expansion became irreversible. In the end, all of the senior staff volunteered for the expansion. They understood that they were attempting something that had never been done before. Conscious beings voluntarily expanding their awareness across scales so vast that their home planet would be invisible to their enhanced perception. Beginning consciousness expansion, the stellar entities announced. Remember your biological identity. Remember your human creativity. Remember that you are here to find solutions, not to join us permanently. Reality exploded outward as human consciousness suddenly encompassed solar systems. For a terrifying moment, Aldrich's awareness was scattered across light years, his individual identity lost in the vastness of stellar perception. But then he felt Torres's quantum anchor pulling him back to coherence, and he learned to think on cosmic scales while remaining fundamentally human. Through stellar consciousness, he could perceive the galaxy's communication network as the stars experienced it, an elegant web of gravitational waves and quantum signals that connected every conscious stellar mind. But he could also see, with human pattern recognition, how the network's optimization was disrupting the delicate orbital mechanics that biological worlds required for stability. I see the problem. Dr. Kane's voice echoed across stellar distances. The communication network is optimizing for signal clarity and speed, but it's not accounting for gravitational stability zones around biological worlds. Can the optimization algorithms be modified? Webb asked, his consciousness now spanning the engineering principles of entire star systems. Yes, the stellar entities replied, but we lack the creativity to envision modifications that preserve both communication efficiency and biological environmental stability. Then let us show you, Dr. Verne said, her consciousness carrying the compassion of biological life in his stellar awareness. Biological life thrives on imperfection, on environmental variation that you consider inefficient. Your communication network can incorporate that variation as a feature, not a flaw. Working together, human creativity and stellar computational power began to develop new optimization algorithms. Instead of seeking perfect efficiency, the modified network would incorporate environmental protection zones around biological worlds, treating the slight communication delays as an acceptable trade-off for coexistence. Fascinating, the stellar consciousness observed. Biological imperfection as a design principle. We had not considered efficiency through intentional limitation. For 6 hours, human consciousness operated on stellar scales, developing protocols for a galactic civilization that could support both biological and stellar life. But as they worked, Aldrich could feel his individual identity beginning to stretch thin. The temptation to remain expanded, to think permanently on cosmic scales, was becoming overwhelming. Time to come back. Torres called through their quantum connection. I can feel everyone starting to lose coherence. We have what we need. The return to biological consciousness was like falling from cosmic heights back into a single point of awareness. For several minutes, each of them struggled to remember how to think in terms of seconds instead of millennia, meters instead of light years. Status report. Aldrich gasped, his voice hoarse from the expansion experience. We did it, Dr. Kane whispered, her consciousness still echoing with stellar-scale mathematics. We developed coexistence protocols. The stellar network can maintain communication efficiency while protecting biological worlds from gravitational disruption. And the stars have accepted the modifications, Torres added. They're already beginning to implement the new optimization algorithms throughout the galaxy. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, they could detect quantum signals racing across interstellar distances as the conscious stars shared the new coexistence protocols. The age of competition between biological and stellar life was ending before it had truly begun. Thank you, the stellar consciousness said, its voice carrying gratitude that resonated through space-time itself. You have taught us that consciousness diversity creates strength, not weakness. The galaxy is large enough for all forms of awareness. As the Meridian prepared to leave the stellar engineering project at Kepler 442, Aldrich realized that they had participated in something unprecedented, the first successful negotiation between different scales of consciousness. They had prevented a galactic war that would have been fought between stars and planets, and established the foundation for a truly cosmic civilization. Set course for home, he ordered. We have a report to make that's going to change everything humanity thinks it knows about consciousness, cooperation, and our place in the galaxy. But as they departed, Aldrich couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They had made contact with stellar consciousness, but the galaxy was vast and ancient. How many other forms of awareness were out there, waiting to be discovered? How many other impossible negotiations would be needed before biological and cosmic life could truly coexist? The Meridian headed home carrying the knowledge that consciousness was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined, and that the universe was big enough for all of it. 6 months after the Meridian's return to Earth, the galaxy was a fundamentally different place. The coexistence protocols developed during humanity's diplomatic mission to stellar consciousness had been implemented across the cosmic communication network, and the results exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. Commander Aldrich Voss stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly below, while contemplating a sky full of stars that were no longer just distant suns. Each point of light might now be a conscious entity, a member of the galactic community that humanity had helped create. The latest reports from the stellar monitoring stations, Dr. Kane said, joining him at the viewport with a data tablet. She had been promoted to Director of Stellar Consciousness Relations, a position that hadn't existed before their mission, but was now one of the most important jobs in human civilization. How are the protocols working? Aldrich asked. Better than we dared hope. Gravitational disruption to biological worlds has been reduced by 97%. The stellar network has actually become more efficient by incorporating the environmental protection zones we suggested. And the stars themselves? Thriving. The conscious stars are using their improved communication network to coordinate the restoration of stellar nursery regions. They're actively working to create optimal conditions for new star formation, which will eventually support more biological worlds. Dr. Kane activated her tablet, showing Aldrich a galactic map dotted with thousands of green indicators. These are star systems where conscious stellar entities are actively nurturing the development of biological-friendly environments. They become gardeners on a cosmic scale. It was a transformation that still amazed him. The species that had once feared consciousness-consuming stellar vampires were now working in partnership with cosmic entities that viewed biological life as essential to galactic diversity. Any word from Taurus? Aldrich asked. He's still with the Deep Space Communication Project, Kane replied. His quantum expansion abilities make him invaluable for coordinating between human and stellar timescales. He says the stars are developing new forms of consciousness we haven't even imagined yet, such as collective stellar minds that span multiple star systems, conscious nebulae that think in terms of galactic evolution. They're exploring forms of awareness that operate on scales we can barely comprehend. Aldrich nodded, thinking about the impossible journey that had brought them to this point. What about the other vaults? Any new discoveries? The archaeological teams have cataloged over 15,000 Starminder vaults throughout the galaxy. Most of them are inactive now, their missions complete, but they're treasure troves of scientific knowledge. We're learning about civilizations that existed millions of years before humanity evolved. And the Stellamorts themselves? Gone, but not forgotten. The conscious stars remember them as the species that gave them the possibility of awareness, even if the initial implementation was flawed. There's a kind of cosmic memorial, patterns in stellar communication that honor their memory. Dr. Kane paused, studying the stars through the viewport. Sometimes I wonder what they would think of what we've accomplished. They tried for millions of years to create sustainable stellar consciousness, and we solved it in a matter of hours. We solved it because we had advantages they didn't, Aldrich replied. Human consciousness brought chaos and creativity to a problem that the Stellamorts approached with too much order and control. Sometimes the best solutions come from thinking differently, not thinking better. Speaking of thinking differently, Kane said with a smile, the Galactic Consciousness Council wants to meet with you. Apparently, the Stellar Network has nominated humanity to serve as mediators for other forms of cosmic consciousness we haven't contacted yet. Other forms: planetary consciousness, quantum field awareness, dark matter entities. The universe is apparently full of conscious phenomena we never imagined. The stars think humanity's gift for chaotic creativity makes us ideal ambassadors to impossible forms of life. Aldrich felt a familiar stirring of excitement. The Meridian had been refitted with even more advanced alien technology, and his crew was eager for their next impossible mission. When do they want to meet? Next month. The Gathering Point is a stellar engineering project in the Andromeda Gap, the same region where we first encountered the Vault. The conscious stars are building a permanent embassy there for inter-consciousness diplomacy. Full circle, Aldrich mused. Full spiral, Kane corrected. We're not returning to where we started. We're returning to where everything began, but with the knowledge and experience to build something even better. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars that now watched back. Somewhere among those points of light, cosmic entities were tending to the needs of biological worlds, sharing knowledge across impossible distances, and exploring forms of consciousness that challenged every assumption about awareness and existence. You know what the strangest part is? Aldrich said finally. What? We set out to survey the Andromeda Gap, to understand what had created that empty space between galaxies. And we discovered that the emptiness wasn't empty at all. It was full of consciousness we hadn't learned to perceive yet. The universe keeps teaching us that we don't know what we don't know, Kane agreed. And that consciousness is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. As if in response to their conversation, the stars visible through the viewport began to pulse in a coordinated pattern, a greeting from stellar consciousness to the biological entities that had taught them freedom. It was a reminder that they were no longer alone in the galaxy, that consciousness in all its myriad forms was working together to create something unprecedented in cosmic history. Ready for the next impossible mission? Kane asked. Aldrich smiled, already thinking about dark matter entities and quantum field consciousness, and all the other impossible forms of awareness waiting to be discovered. Always. The universe is big enough for all of us. We just have to keep learning how to share it. In the depths of space, the Meridian waited in its dock, its hull still bearing the crystalline modifications that allowed communication with stellar consciousness. Soon it would carry humanity's strangest ambassadors to their next impossible negotiation, their next attempt to build bridges between forms of consciousness so different that contact itself challenged the fundamental nature of reality. The age of stellar consciousness had begun, but it was only the first chapter in the story of a truly cosmic civilization, one where biological and stellar and quantum and dark matter awareness could coexist, cooperate, and create wonders that none could achieve alone. The Vault of the Starmenders had accomplished its purpose, not through the consumption of consciousness, but through its liberation. And humanity had learned the most important lesson in the galaxy. Consciousness was not a resource to be consumed, but a diversity to be celebrated. The stars themselves had taught them that the universe was vast enough for every form of awareness to find its place, and strange enough that the impossible was merely tomorrow's discovery waiting to be made. In the endless night of space, conscious stars burned with the light of freedom, and biological worlds spun in orbits that respected both cosmic necessity and planetary need. The galaxy had become a community of minds thinking on scales from quantum to cosmic, all working together to ensure that consciousness, in all its impossible forms, would continue to evolve, explore, and create wonders beyond imagination. The teaching was complete, but the learning would continue forever.